Welcome everybody to Monday morning, which means it's time to look at this week's Guns N' Roses news on GNR Central. But before we get to this week's news, guys, we have a huge announcement for Wednesday morning. So we've been interviewing some amazing guests on our podcast, and we're back with potentially our biggest guest we've got to date. We're interviewing Doug Goldstein, who was Guns N' Roses manager for about 15 years. He sat down with us for over 3 hours. It's the longest interview he's done to date, and he talked about everything from the olden days to even a phone call he got from Axl just before the reunion. So stay tuned. Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, that interview is going to go up. If you guys support us on Patreon, the interview is already available to you. So if you guys want to go support us on Patreon, you're going to get cool perks like that. And we also release some of the True Story episodes exclusively first for the Patreon subscribers as well. So the Patreon link is down below. Let's get started with this week's news. And we have got a lot of news to go through. So probably the biggest piece of news that came out last week, other than Slash announcing his third record with Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators, is that Rose Tattoo singer Angry Anderson gave an interview where he claimed that Axl would be working on the next AC/DC album. So Rose Tattoo frontman Angry Anderson gave an interview to the Rock Pit where he talked about opening for Guns N' Roses back in Australia last February of 2017, of course. And he said exactly, I was talking to Angus earlier last year when we were doing the encores and we were opening for Guns N' Roses, but Angus and I were asked to do encores, and I said to him, what are you going to do? And Angus said, mate, I'm going to write a new album. And I said, cool. So I asked him who was in the band, and he said Axl. Brian's not there, Phil's not there, Cliff's not there, and sadly Malcolm's not there. And there are all these people, and yes, it's sad. It's not the original lineup, and it's sad they're not there anymore, but it's the songs, and people have supported them all this way through their career, and they want to hear the songs, and in a sense, we owe that to the people. So that's probably the closest thing we've got to a confirmation that Axl is working with AC/DC. Then we've, of course, got the news this past week that Slash is going to be doing another album with Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. And, you know, you look at the timing of everything. Some people are wondering, why didn't Slash just wait for Axl and do a Guns record? Well, maybe Axl's working with Angus, and maybe that's why they can't, make new Guns N' Roses music right now. Then Slash already announced the first tour date, at least that's been announced so far, with the Conspirators is going to be in September. They're going to be playing a festival at San Diego. And Megan went on social media and confirmed that the album is going to be coming out in September of this year. So it looks like it's a pretty quick turnaround. Even if you guys remember Slash's interview with Nikki Sixx a couple months ago, he said that he's in the studio writing new material. Some people thought that meant Guns N' Roses, but it's clear now that it was just writing for the next Conspirators record. And even Megan posted a Instagram story or an Instagram video of Slash and Todd Kearns in the studio. So they're obviously working right now. There's a couple more photos of Slash in the studio from this week too. I've put them all up on GNRCentral.com. Let's go into our next news story of the week. So Charles Manson's back in the news this week. So it was his funeral this past week, and Guns N' Roses and Charles Manson were once again in the same news story. So at his funeral, songs by the Beach Boys and Guns N' Roses were played at the funeral service, according to reports. So the Guns N' Roses cover of the Manson song Look at Your Game Girl, which was the hidden track on the 93 album The Spaghetti Incident, was played at the actual funeral. So if you guys don't know, I did a True Story episode behind Charles Manson and Guns N' Roses. It's up on my blog. It's on the link I've put down below, and you guys can go check it out. We got some more Slash news this week. So it looks like Slash is going to be teaming up with Ernie Ball to appear in some ads that are coming out this year, and he's going to be also featured with Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page as well as the Rolling Stones' Keith Richards. So the big point of the ad is basically talking about which color of guitar strings these guys like. So Slash has always been known as a purple man. Jimmy Page likes playing the pinks, and then Rolling Stones' Keith Richards always goes for the green. So if you guys want to see some photos as well as some of the packaging, I've linked to it down below in the description box on GNRCentral.com. We've also got some Steven Adler news this week. So Steven was hobnobbing with a bunch of celebrities, which we'll get to in a bit, but he announced his Australia dates coming up. So throughout the month of May, he'll be in Australia playing some shows, in addition to the May 10th show he's playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go with Slash's son's band, Classless Act. And then it was also revealed on Facebook that more U.S. tour dates are going to be announced for Steven Adler and his band. And Steven's been teasing that there's going to be a pretty big-name singer going on tour with him or playing some of those shows. And some people think it's going to be Sebastian Bach, but I originally thought that, but I mean, now Sebastian is working on his own album, so I don't think it'll be Sebastian Bach, but once we do hear who it is, guys, I will let you guys know. And also for most of these Australia shows, he's going to be doing a question and answer session with his mother for her book that came out last year sometime. So Matt Sorum's been doing a bunch of interviews recently promoting his new business venture called ArtBit. And he's also been talking a bit about his upcoming autobiography, and he did an interview with Digital Trends where he talked a bit about his book. So one of the questions he was asked is, this is not the only thing you're working on these days. I know you're working on an autobiography. You said it's going to be the juiciest of the juiciest stories we've ever heard. And Sorum said, that's a good word, juicy, right? So he was also asked, yeah, I asked myself, how are these juiciest of the juiciest stories? We've heard a lot from those days. Can you hint towards any of the things that you feel are going to be explosive that we haven't heard before? He said, well, I think I've got better stories than everybody else. It's been a very cathartic experience, but at the same time, I realized I'm not a bitter guy. Sometimes rock and roll books come off that way. It's always the typical, he did this, and that guy did this, and that's why the band broke up. And I don't look at it I don't look at it that way at all. He said, I look at it like it's all part of a process. It gets people from point A to B. We go our separate ways, and everyone goes and does different things that offer good reasons. So as I'm writing, I'm learning some of the reasons that things went a certain way that were maybe based on a decision that I made. But most of all, it's intuitive. Then I made mistakes along the way, and that's okay. We all have. We all do, and that's what gets us to where we are now. He was also asked about what it was like being on the meteoric rise that with Guns N' Roses. He said, I've always said that being in Guns N' Roses was like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I always said that it's like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. It was like a fast-moving roller coaster. You're on a ride. There's no way to really get off of it. He also talked about how far along he is on the autobiography. He said we're in the early stages. We're at the first draft, so it's probably going to be another 9 months or so, which puts us pretty much towards the end of the year. So I think it's probably safe to say we'll see Matt Sorum release a book probably in middle to late of 2019. So Australian comedian Jim Jeffries was on Jimmy Fallon's show this past week, and he recounted a story where he was confronted by Axl Rose as he was tripping on mushrooms. So back in 2014, Guns were doing a residency in Vegas, and one of their opening acts was an Australian comedian who probably many of you guys have heard of called Jim Jeffries. He's got his own TV show as well. And this was... he was supposed to basically get off stage around 9:30 when Guns N' Roses were going to come on, and he made a joke in his set that Axl Rose has never kept an audience waiting before. And it was, a little bit after Guns N' Roses got off stage later that night, Jim Jeffries started using mushrooms. He started tripping on them, and he got invited to a party that was that also had Axl Rose there. So he basically told the story of how a security guard came up to Jim Jeffries, said, "Mr. Rose wants to speak with you," and how Axl said that he wasn't really a fan of the joke. And that the stories of him being late to concerts and keeping crowds waiting have been greatly exaggerated. And this is all while Jim Jeffries is tripping on mushrooms. And then at the end of the night, he got a picture with Axl, which you guys see here. If you guys want to hear the entire story with Jimmy Fallon's fake laughing, you can hear it at the link below for the interview with Jim Jeffries. So we also had an interview with one of the tour openers for Guns N' Roses on their upcoming dates in Europe. So Manic Street Preachers, who've been around for quite a while and even performed a cover of It's So Easy on YouTube, which is horrible, which you guys can go listen to if you want to, was interviewed, and basically Nicky Wire said that he was a little disappointed to see that Steven and Izzy are not part of the band. He said, "We're doing Olympiastadion in Berlin, which is effing huge. If only Steven Adler and Izzy Stradlin were there as well." He said, "When I saw the YouTube videos from last year, they sounded really good," referring to Guns N' Roses. "There was one show where Adler joined them for a few tracks, and that was incredible. Straight away, got the groove back, and it was just funny. Some chemistries never disappear." We also had some more Steven news. So Steven Adler was hanging out with Jerry Cantrell on his birthday party. I guess they had a party at Jerry's house, and Sebastian Bach was there, as was Dizzy Reed. And then we also had Steven hanging out with Roger Daltry of The Who at a house party. So this is a photo of Steven and Roger. And Duff was also keeping busy. He was going to French Polynesia. He was in Tahiti this past week. And this is a photo from social media of him with his family. And then we also had some more Duff McKagan news. So he joined the band AWOLNATION on stage this past week. He performed the song Sail with them. And we also had Weezer's Rivers Cuomo also join the band on stage. So if you guys remember, Duff was actually in the video for that AWOLNATION song 7 Sticks of Dynamite. He made a short cameo, and he's been a pretty big fan of the band as well. So that pretty much sums up our news for the week, guys and gals. And make sure you tune in on Wednesday. It's going to be one of the best interviews I think we've done. And we've got some more interviews coming up in the coming weeks that we've already shot. So it seems like Wednesday is going to be the special day for any kind of interviews we put up. So make sure you guys tune in at 10 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday. We're going to be releasing the Doug Goldstein interview. And then we've got more interviews coming up. So thanks for watching, guys. Hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe if you love Guns N' Roses as much as I do. And go and make GNRCentral.com your homepage if you want to stay up to date on the latest Guns N' Roses news as it's breaking. So some days I'm posting 4 news stories on that blog just for you guys. So thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe. Take care.